As a wise man once said, I don't like sand. It's coarse and rough and irritating, and it gets everywhere, especially in my Dune-inspired fleshlight. Welcome to Deep Thoughts While Gaming. I'm Chris Chappell. With the release of Dune 2, I thought I'd prepare myself by going to the most authentic Dune experience there is. No, not the books. Reading is for losers. I'm talking about the 1992 strategy game, Dune. The DOS must flow. Look at these graphics. Here is the truest representation of Dune, captured on the humblest of early 90s computers. Take that, big budget Hollywood CGI cluster. I get ahead of myself. The story of Dune is complicated. It was written in 1965 by American science fiction author Frank Herbert. That story was dense enough, but the story of Dune was eventually expanded into multiple novels, further elaborated by new novels written by Frank Herbert's son, Brian Herbert, spanning the course of, I kid you not, 10,000 years. Here's my attempt to summarize it. Far in the future, humanity has formed an expansive empire across the known universe, where different factions, called houses, compete for power and favor with the Emperor. There are no sentient aliens, but there are giant worms on a planet called Arrakis. It's also called Dune. The worms produce something called spice. It's a highly addictive drug. But unlike stupid Earth-based drugs like fentanyl, this one not only makes you live longer, but it also gives you cool eyes and can make you see the future. It's also somehow required for space travel. Dare to say no to drugs, kids. As the book says, he who controls the spice controls the universe. The story focuses on Paul Atreides, whose father, Leto Atreides, leads House Atreides, who's been getting very popular with the other houses, much to the Emperor's chagrin. So, in a seeming boon to House Atreides, the Emperor gives control over Arrakis to them, kicking out House Harkonnen that used to be in charge. Harkonnen and Atreides have a long-standing blood feud, but it turns out it was a trap, and the Emperor and Baron Harkonnen were working together to kill Leto. Paul manages to escape into the desert, where he meets up with the Fremen, a group of warrior religious fanatics who worship the worms as God, until they start worshiping Paul as God and Messiah, because it turns out he's the universe's super being, the Kwisatz Haderach. Okay, I know that probably came out of nowhere, but you see there's this other faction called the Bene Gesserit, who are kind of like a women-only Jedi, if the Jedi were focused on a centuries-long breeding program to create the perfect man, the Kwisatz Haderach, who could see the future. Okay, the Jedi comparison doesn't really work. Oh God, I haven't even mentioned Paul's mother yet. Okay, so her name is Jessica, and she's also a Bene Gesserit. But she wasn't officially married to Paul's father, she was just a concubine. So he could still officially marry someone in another house as a political alliance. But they really loved each other, and Leto wanted to make Jessica his wife, but she said no, they needed to play the game like everyone else. Oh yeah, the Bene Gesserits wanted Jessica to bear Leto a daughter, so they could marry her to someone in House Harkonnen to end the blood feud and create the Kwisatz Haderach, the super being. But because she loved Leto and he wanted to have a son, she gave him a son, Paul, because the Bene Gesserit can control that sort of thing. Oh, it also turns out that Jessica is the secret daughter of Baron Harkonnen. She doesn't know that. Okay. Anyway, Paul rides a worm, takes over Dune, and the Fremen launch a genocidal jihad throughout the known universe. And that perfectly sums up the story of Dune. I don't want to see any comments complaining about things I left out. You're furiously typing one now, aren't you? The complexity of the story of Dune has made it rather difficult to adapt to other media. There's the David Lynch Dune movie that, in typical David Lynch fashion, somehow makes a story about psychic space drug addicts and giant worms even more insane. This was the guy who gave us Eraserhead and Twin Peaks. If only Dune had a log lady to tell us what the heck was going on. Then there was the early 2000s Sci-Fi Channel made-for-TV movie miniseries that was much more faithful to the book, which, may I remind you, is about psychic space drug addicts, one of which becomes God, I think. And then, of course, the recent Denis Villeneuve movies that somehow manages to treat the subject matter in Lynch's insane over-the-top manner, but with deadly seriousness. My God, he who controls those cheekbones controls my heart. All of these adaptations, of course, pale in comparison to the DOS game. The adventure strategy style gameplay means you, in the shoes of Paul Atreides, must manage economic resources and military ones, with the ultimate goal of retaking the planet Dune from the Harkonnens, as you also become some kind of perfect space god human thing. At least you don't need to become a giant worm. The game is unique in how it balances different styles and goals. The adventure layer of gameplay has you running through dungeons in a pretty typical fashion for the time. But the strategy layer switches to a top-down view that lets you manage both your growing military and spice production. Focus too much on building your military, and you might be able to kill your Harkonnen adversaries quicker, but the Emperor will be mad that you aren't meeting spice quotas, and then it's game over. Focus too much on the spice, and the Harkonnen will massacre your forces. The early game does a good job introducing you to the multifaceted story of Frank Herbert's Dune. Sweeping in scope, it could be easy to get lost. Fortunately, that's definitely not a problem the movies have. Paul isn't your typical hero. This isn't like Star Wars, where it's clear who are the bad guys and who are the good guys. Namely, the two brave, handy, capable individuals doing their best to run a galaxy while fighting off the remnants of a creepy cult that practices mind control, assaults indigenous peoples, and incest. But when analyzing a story like Dune, it's best not to think of it in terms of good guys versus bad guys, since there aren't any. After all, Paul becomes the figurehead of a genocidal jihad, or crusades as it's called in the new movie. No, it's better to talk about who is the protagonist and who is the antagonist, because some stories don't have bad guys and some don't have good guys. While you might think, at least that's clear in Dune, it might be more complicated than you think. Here on Deep Thoughts While Gaming, we've talked about history, politics, philosophy, and now, complex literary analysis. Rather than saying the protagonist is the good guy, a better definition is the character with the greatest need, a need that drives the entire story. By the end of the story, that need must either have been met or defeated. The antagonist is the character whose need most interferes with the protagonist filling theirs. That's a definition that would fit any story, regardless of if there's a good guy or bad guy. And by that definition, isn't Paul the protagonist? Isn't avenging his father, overthrowing the Harkonnens, and fulfilling his destiny as the Kwisatz Haderach the driving force of the novel? And isn't Baron Harkonnen, the man who killed his father and rules Dune, the antagonist? Oh, you poor, unspice-enhanced simpletons. Not at all. What does Paul want? What is his greatest need? A close read of Dune reveals Paul's greatest desire is to avoid his fate as the Kwisatz Haderach, a fate he fears is fatalistically predetermined, regardless of what actions he takes. He reacts in horror to the visions he receives of the coming jihad, but there's someone forcing that destiny upon him. His mother, Jessica. At one point, Paul realizes, my mother is my enemy. She does not know it, but she is. She is bringing the jihad. She bore me, she trained me, she is my enemy. Are the swirling clouds of infinite futures snapping into focus for you? If you're realizing now that Jessica is the real antagonist of Dune, your vision is still clouded. May your knife chip and shatter. Paul realizes that events are out of his control. Even when he becomes the Kwisatz Haderach and can perfectly see the future, all he sees is that he's stuck fatalistically on a path he can't get off of. But the protagonist is supposed to be the character whose need drives the story. Paul is not the protagonist. Jessica is. She was forced by the politics of her world to be merely the concubine of Leto Atreides, when deep down she wanted to be recognized as his true wife. To fulfill that need, she breaks with a centuries-old Bene Gesserit breeding program to bear Leto a son, and when Leto is killed, she sets that son on the path to become the Kwisatz Haderach, the godhead of a jihad that kills 60 billion people. The very last words of Dune the novel are Jessica speaking to Paul's partner Chani, who for now must also play the role of concubine. Jessica tells her, "We who carry the name of concubine, history will call us wives." Paul's need to stop that very history from happening does not drive the story. If he succeeded, there'd be no story. But that need is the greatest obstacle to Jessica fulfilling her need. Fortunately, Dune has a happy ending, where the protagonist, Jessica, has her greatest need met. She will be remembered as Leto's wife, and Paul, her antagonist, is defeated. He is the Kwisatz Haderach, and the entire known universe will be bathed in the blood of a jihad he doesn't want launched in his name. Yep, happy ending. Thank you for watching Deep Thoughts While Gaming. And remember, if life doesn't go your way, it's because it's all fatalistically predetermined, or you have some serious mommy issues. And be sure to hit that join button. You'll get access to exclusive emojis, a Discord server, live streams, videos, and all the spice you could want. Oh God, I'm turning into a giant space worm! And check out this video about the new Final Fantasy Rebirth and why it's the love child of Andrew Tate.